my boyfriend doesn't want to marry me. I've always been someone who believed in the idea of a happily ever after. You know, the fairy tale ending where two people fall in love, get married, and ride off into the sunset? That's what I've wanted for as long as I can remember. I grew up watching my parents celebrate anniversaries, holding hands, and laughing over shared memories. They made marriage seem like the ultimate expression of love. So, naturally, I imagined my future would look the same. Enter Chris. We met 3 years ago, at a mutual friend's housewarming party. He had this easygoing smile, a voice that could calm a storm, and a wit that kept everyone around him laughing. I was drawn to him immediately. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other, at coffee shops, at the gym, even at a random bookstore. It felt like fate, and before I knew it, we were dating. Chris is everything I could have asked for in a partner. He's thoughtful, funny, and supportive. When I decided to change careers last year, he was my biggest cheerleader. When my dad got sick, Chris was there, sitting with me through long hospital visits and late-night tears. He's the guy who remembers to pick up my favorite snacks on his way home and who surprises me with flowers for no reason at all. I love him, with all my heart. That's why this situation is so painful. About 6 months ago, I brought up the idea of marriage. It wasn't the first time we'd talked about it, but it was the first time I asked him outright where he stood. We were having dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, and I thought it would be the perfect time to broach the subject. I remember nervously twirling my spaghetti around my fork, avoiding eye contact as I said, "So, have you ever thought about us getting married?" Chris froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. He set it down and leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, yeah, I've thought about it," he said. "But I don't know. I'm not sure marriage is really my thing." I felt like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over me. Not his thing? What did that even mean? I pressed him for more details, but all he could say was that he wasn't against the idea of being with me forever, he just didn't see the need for a piece of paper to define our relationship. At the time, I let it go. I told myself it was just a phase, that maybe he needed more time to get used to the idea. But as the weeks turned into months, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I saw a couple posting engagement photos on Instagram or heard a friend talking about wedding plans, it stung. I started to wonder if I was asking for too much or if there was something wrong with me that made him hesitant to commit. Last weekend, we went to my cousin's wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony, full of love and joy. Watching the bride walk down the aisle, I couldn't help but imagine myself in her place. I glanced at Chris during the vows, hoping to catch some hint of longing or excitement in his expression, but he just looked neutral. Like he was watching a movie he'd seen a dozen times before. On the car ride home, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Do you really not want to get married?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Chris sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "It's not that I don't want to be with you," he said. "I just don't think marriage changes anything. We're already happy, right? Why mess with that?" Happy. The word echoed in my mind. Yes, we were happy, but was that enough? For me, marriage wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a promise, a commitment to face life's challenges together, no matter what. It was a symbol of love and partnership. But to Chris, it seemed like an unnecessary formality. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make him see how important this was to me. But another part of me was scared. What if pushing him on this would drive him away? What if he'd rather walk away than take that step with me? The thought of losing him was unbearable. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while Chris slept peacefully beside me. I tried to picture my future. Could I be okay with things staying as they were? Could I give up on the dream of marriage if it meant keeping Chris in my life? Or would the resentment and disappointment eventually eat away at our relationship? The next day, I confided in my best friend, Emily. She's known me since we were kids, and she's always been my sounding board. When I told her everything, she didn't hold back. "You need to figure out what's more important to you," she said. "Chris is amazing, but if marriage is a deal breaker for you, you can't just ignore that. It'll only lead to more pain down the road." Her words hit me hard. I'd been so focused on trying to make things work that I hadn't stopped to think about what I really wanted. Was I willing to compromise on something that mattered so much to me? Or was I trying to force Chris into a role he didn't want to play? I decided it was time for an honest conversation. No more dancing around the issue, no more brushing it under the rug. We needed to lay everything out on the table and figure out where we stood. Because as much as I loved Chris, I couldn't keep living in this limbo. To be continued. When Chris came home that evening, I was already waiting in the living room. My heart was pounding, but I knew this conversation couldn't wait any longer. "We need to talk," I said as he walked in. He raised an eyebrow, setting his bag down by the door. "Sounds serious." "It is." I gestured for him to sit on the couch, and he did, looking more confused than concerned. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our future," I began. "And I need to know if we're on the same page. Because if we're not, we need to figure out what that means." Chris frowned, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Okay," he said cautiously. "What do you mean?" "I mean marriage," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I've tried to tell myself it's not a big deal, that I can be okay with things the way they are. But the truth is, it is a big deal to me. I want to get married, Chris. I want that commitment, that promise. And if that's something you can't give me, I need to know." He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I love you, and I want to be with you. But marriage, it just doesn't feel necessary to me. It's not about you, it's about how I feel about the whole concept." "But it's not just about you," I said, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "This is about us. And if it matters to me, shouldn't that count for something?" Chris looked away, his jaw tightening. "Of course it counts," he said softly. I don't want to promise something I'm not sure I can deliver. Marriage is forever, and I don't want to mess it up. Isn't it better to be honest about that?" His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could feel tears welling up, but I blinked them away. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "That you love me, but not enough to marry me?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," he said quickly. "I'm saying I love you enough to be honest about where I'm at. I don't want to make promises I can't keep." The room fell silent. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of a car passing by outside. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into the unknown. "I need time to think," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't something I can just brush off." Chris nodded, his expression somber. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." But as I watched him walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already drifting apart. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.